Law student by day, serial killer by night? That's the accusation against a woman in Brazil right now, where investigators in two of the nation's largest cities are connecting her with multiple deaths, a stabbing, poisonings, an illicit affair. We're talking with a homicide investigator about how police are able to piece together a case like this and bring an alleged mass killer to justice. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Before we get started, this is a Law&Crime legal alert. There are allegations claiming that online apps like DraftKings, ESPN Bet, BetMGM, Bet365, Fanatics Sportsbook, Caesars Sportsbook, that they are engineered for addiction. These multi-billion-dollar companies allegedly continue to put profit over safety. Every small payout, free bet, boosted parlay, that can trigger a dopamine rush that creates dependency and a destructive habit. They can keep users hooked and trap people in a cycle that can lead to serious financial loss. Well, our legal sponsors are taking on the online gambling industry to seek justice and potential compensation. So if you or a loved one has struggled with addiction or financial hardship or mental health issues due to sports betting apps, then visit gamblinglawsuits.com/sidebar to take a short quiz and check your eligibility to file a claim. 36-year-old Ana Paula Veloso Fernandes, a mom, a law student out in Sao Paulo, Brazil. She is behind bars. Why? Because she is accused of killing 4 people in just 5 months. I know, this is shocking to say the least. And now, new details are coming out about how she allegedly targeted her suspected victims, as the chief investigator labels her a, quote, psychopath and serial killer. This is according to multiple Latin American news outlets. So to talk about the bizarre circumstances surrounding the deaths of these 4 people, and there's a lot to get into, I want to bring in Chris McDonough, who's a homicide investigator, tons of experience in hunting down alleged killers. Thank you so much for taking the time. You know, Chris, before we even dive into the specifics of this case, I have to say, when I first heard about it, when it was first being reported, when you look at her background, I don't think she fits the typical idea, the typical model of what you would think a potential serial killer looks like. But I guess, you know, she wouldn't be the first time, if these allegations are true, that looks can be deceiving.
Yeah, absolutely, Jesse. I mean, when you think about what, you know, a serial killer would look like, she definitely does not fit that mold. I mean, she's got this angelic face. She's got this, you know, temperament about her around other people, which is extremely disarming. And that demeanor in of itself will allow, you know, her to have the ability to exploit vulnerabilities within other people.
That's a good point. I mean, you think about Ted Bundy and situations like that, but I want to get into this, okay? So once Fernandes was arrested, she allegedly confessed. This is according to Brazilian civil police, and gave officers details about what happened. So let's talk about the person that Brazilian police believe is Fernandez's first victim. We're talking about 51-year-old Marcelo Fonseca. According to the Daily Mail, Fonseca was killed in Guarulhos. This is back in January. The Sun reports that Fonseca was Fernandez's landlord. She claims that they had an argument where he allegedly threatened her family. She told investigators, according to reporting from the Sun, that she stabbed him as he sat on a couch. She then put up a sheet to block the entrance to the room so that her son and niece wouldn't see it, and then allegedly left Fonseca's body to rot. Police allege she didn't call to report the death until 5 days after the stabbing, when her son started to complain about the smell. According to the Sun's reporting, Fernandes later burned the couch to remove the odors. Now, Chris, a lot to break down here. First of all, you wonder, is she a reliable narrator? If this idea, even if it's a claim of, I guess, self-defense, maybe that's the argument, maybe not, the fact that she waited, the fact that she apparently tried to cover up or destroy evidence, tried to make sure nobody saw it, I guess it does cast doubt on her story.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we have to also take into account that, you know, this is Brazil, right? The Constitution doesn't come into play here, nor does Miranda or anything like that. So the first thing we always have to question when we're looking at these objectively is, you know, what pattern of technique in terms of interviewing was utilized. And then the second piece of this is that particular crime is kind of, you know, odd when in measured against the other types of crimes she may be responsible for. And meaning a knife was used. So that's kind of off for a female serial killer. It's typical for a male, but not for a female. That's a very rare situation. And once these types of situations are accomplished by a suspect, they didn't anticipate what's on the other side, i.e. a dead body. So that's a lot of dead weight. And maybe that's the situation here where she leaves him in the apartment. People start complaining, and now she has to figure out, okay, how do I get out of here? And, or, how do I destroy this body? And when I say get out of here, meaning what type of story am I going to make up to show that this was potentially a self-defense?
When you're interviewing a suspect, and usually, I mean, so many of the cases we covered, they're denying that they had involvement in something, and then they get caught up and are contradicted by what other evidence investigators may have. But if you have somebody who's allegedly describing the details of a crime, a killing, and going into specifics, horrifying specifics, and you wonder, are they really making this up? Could they be making this up on the fly like this? How do you gauge it? Do you say, I think this is pretty credible? Maybe the sequence of events might be a little challenging in terms of, her being threatened, but saying allegedly saying I stabbed him while he's on the couch doesn't sound good. So you wonder, is this true?
Yeah, so one of the things that you want to do right away is make sure you have a firm understanding of what that crime scene looks like. And so one of the techniques that you can utilize is take a chair once everything has been resolved with inside of that crime scene, i.e. the victim's been moved, the evidence has been collected. We used to call it bagging and tagging. And so just what you do is you sit there, you study those walls, you study the scene in of itself. So that when you do get somebody who says, hey, I'm the person, and these are the intricate details, you're able to correlate that back to the crime scene based on ideas and details that only the killer would have known. And so that's one way of getting around it.
Now, Fonseca's case was eventually closed due to a lack of evidence. This is according to outlet Carta Capital, but his daughter called for it to be reopened after his former tenant, Fernandez, was later tied to multiple alleged killings, and that's what we're talking about. Now, in April, the alleged second victim here, a woman named Maria Aparecida Rodriguez, was found dead by her sister in Sao Paulo. CNN Brazil reports that Rodriguez had discovered Fernandez's affair with a married military police officer, and I will tell you things get a little complicated here, but this is what we've gleaned from multiple Latin American sources, that Fernandez allegedly posed as Rodriguez, sending threatening messages to the officer's wife, apparently in an attempt to make it look like the officer himself may have killed her as payback. However, CNN Brazil reports that in the hours before she died, Rodriguez was at the home Fernandez shared with her twin sister, Roberta Christina, having coffee and cake, and authorities believe that that cake was laced with some sort of cleaning solution. Per CNN, Rodriguez went back to her own home where she was found dead a few hours later. Now, Chris, when somebody's body is discovered in typical investigations, if you're dealing with poisoning, right, it might not be clear on the outset that you have foul play, right? It's different than a shooting. It's different than a stabbing. How do you investigate a potential poisoning case?
Well, first of all, you have to take into consideration right away that if there is no obvious evidence of trauma and or, cause of death, then, drugs, narcotics, poison, all of that comes into play. And so what you have to do is investigate that crime scene as if there's going to be, a one-off like this. Poisoning is a very rare thing, especially for females. It's more consistent for females. About 15% of cases involve poisoning itself. And so what you'd want to try to do is look for pattern of life in relationship to the suspect that you're investigating and see if there's any kind of indication that would have led them this way.
By the way, interesting that you're talking about a situation of alleged poisoning and stabbing, right? It doesn't seem to be consistent.
No, it doesn't, Jess. And that's really interesting because then you have to ask yourself, did this person learn from the very first killing? And if in fact, if they did, then what in their personality changed? I.e., are they becoming much more organized offender from the very first situation, potentially being disorganized, and now they're basically starting to work on their craft, for lack of a better term.
I want to go to this third alleged victim. So Brazilian police told international news outlet Globo that 65-year-old retiree Neil Correia da Silva also died in April after eating, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing this, a poisoned feijoada, which is a type of Brazilian black bean stew. According to civil police, her friend, this is da Silva's daughter, was allegedly involved in this plot. Yeah, it's believed that Michelle Paiva da Silva, a classmate with Fernandes, paid her around $700 to travel from Sao Paulo to Rio de Janeiro and kill her father. So Chief Inspector Halison Ido seemingly told Globo that there are text messages between the two that confirm the investigator's suspicions. Quote, "We managed to trace, in Neil's case, the whole itinerary. We have proof, the conversations, that it was a feijoada, the way it was done. And in view of this, we also have the testimonials of the people. Ana Paula herself later came to take over, confessing this crime, and reported the whole fact." And Globo's reporting also indicates, and I'm sorry to say this, that Fernandes admitted to poisoning 10 dogs to see how this poison worked, the dosage that she would need. In fact, when officers raided her home, they apparently found this banned pesticide that's similar to rat poison. This is according to the Daily Mail. So Chris, let's start there. Have you ever seen a case before where someone is seemingly practicing on animals in anticipation of a crime on humans?
I've not had a case involving a poisoning of animals. However, I have had many cases where long before humans' life is taken, that animals have taken. There's what they call the homicidal triad. There are three indicators. I mean, uresis, fire starting, and animal cruelty. That's the triad in of itself. And if you have all three of those mixing into a personality type through what we call a pattern of life, then those are going to be pretty, significant once you start seeing that type of problem on a crime scene. The fact that she was able to test 10 separate dogs as it's being reported gives us a little indication into the fact that she's learning from the very first homicide to the now potentially the third homicide here, and that the poisoning of itself separates her from the crime scene. And that's consistent with a lot of female killers. They don't like the blood in the guts, for lack of a better term, i.e. the first stabbing, okay? And so she's adapted her method in relationship to her organization of becoming a better killer.
And by the way, if these allegations are true, aside from the fact that they may have credible evidence and concrete evidence of the conversations between them, I find it very strange and chilling, again, if these allegations are true, that you have this person that essentially hired her, and you knew what she was capable of? I mean, think about, it's not like a one-off, right? Now we're talking about her being implicated in the deaths of multiple people, and she just so happens to be hired for a contract killing. Doesn't that strike you as strange?
Yeah, it does, Jess, but interesting at the same time, right? Because that means the person hiring her also is aware of the sadistic nature that this personality may have. And so that really does raise a lot of red flags. But simultaneously, it's interesting because the investigators are learning as well, right? From the very first one to the second to the third. And they're looking at a common denominator here, this individual that we're talking about, this female. So they're going to do what we call a pattern of life, right? They're going to really go into the weeds with her and kind of figure out, okay, what brought her to this particular circumstance? Is it power? Is it financial gain? What's her social economics? What do those things, those circumstances look like?
And I want to talk about now Fernandez's fourth alleged victim. So we're talking about Haider Maheres, young man from Tunisia. This is per Globo, Fernandez reportedly met him on a dating app. They had apparently been in a relationship. His family told Globo that Fernandez had faked a pregnancy to try to get money from them. He died in his apartment in May. Carta Capital reports that it is believed Fernandez gave him a poisoned milkshake. His body was taken back to Tunisia to be buried. And I will tell you, the bodies of Fonseca, Rodriguez, Da Silva, they were reportedly exhumed so medical examiners could determine their exact causes of death and whether something like poison was in fact involved. Chris, is that common to exhume bodies? And what is the process in exhuming bodies in a criminal investigation?
The process would be, it's almost like an archaeological dig, right? I mean, if they're buried obviously in a coffin or something to that effect, it's much easier. But if it's just in Brazil, we don't know if they're just thrown into an open grave, with something wrapped around them. However, once they get the body, they're sent back down to the medical examiner's office. The medical examiner's office is able to go through some tissue if it's available, and or through bone, and draw some type of bone marrow out. If it's a heavy duty poisoning, there's what they would have called blood markers within inside of either the tissue and or the bone, and you're able to identify the particular poison really specifically. It's an amazing science, but the toxicology reports will be able to tell you hypothetically, how many doses of particular poison, how much narcotics, if it was a narcotics situation that the individual had into their system. And it's a fascinating science, but it can definitely be done.
Now here's a question. How did Fernandez even get on police's radar, right? Well, apparently she informed police that she may have been the victim of an attempted poisoning in April. So according to the news outlet Folha de Sao Paulo, Fernandez reported to police that a cake with a note saying something along the lines of, "For the 4D law class, a cake to sweeten your morning," that was left in a classroom. She told police that the note was signed with the name of her military police lover's wife. So the outlet reports that Fernandez claimed that she hadn't known the officer was married, that this wife had threatened her before. Chief Inspector Halison Ido told Globo, quote, "Ana Paula Veloso came to our police station because of an alleged poisoned cake inside a college. She planted this alleged poisoned cake to try to frame a third person. Through this investigation, we concluded that Ana Paula was not the victim in this case, but rather a serial killer." According to police, this may have been another attempt by her to frame her military police lover or his wife with a crime. But an article from Folha de Sao Paulo says the police spoke with this wife, confirmed she was hundreds of miles away on the day that the cake showed up at the law school, said actually she was the one who was getting threats from Fernandez on social media, not the other way around. And Inspector Ido also told local news outlets that Fernandez tried to use what she learned in law school to cover her tracks. What made our investigation very difficult at first was the fact that most of the victims were buried as if they had died from natural causes. So we had to do all this to show to the judiciary, show the prosecutor of the case that we were facing a serious thing and be able to ask for the exhumation of the body and build the technical evidence, which is this phase that we find ourselves in at the moment. He also told the Globo newspaper it is a cold, unremorseful person who seems to take pleasure in manipulating. The fact that she kept close after the crimes demonstrates the level of control she sought to exercise over everything. Chris, your reaction to all that?
It's interesting because the investigators are obviously using her intellectual arrogance against her. And what they've been able to do is reverse engineer that into the fact that she's, quote, not ordinary, I would say, right? And so what they're showing is her manipulative personality type, which puts her in a different category above, somebody who would just spontaneously take, somebody's life through, passion or greed or whatever, a motive. But in this particular circumstance, it sounds like she's, again, an organized offender who is learning from each particular case. And the fact now that she's taking it even further, i.e. she's manipulating other people, not just killing them, but manipulating the narrative and pulling other investigators in to really kind of think through this, puts her at a very high risk to the community. And I'm kind of glad they got her off the street, to be honest with you, based on what I'm hearing.
Yeah, if these allegations are true. And I'll tell you, you and I had spoken earlier about something that I thought was interesting, where you had made the point that killers, you know, it doesn't, when they commit a crime, they commit a killing, they commit a murder, it doesn't always turn out the way that they envisioned it. And you and I had talked about how Brian Kohberger, right, this PhD criminology grad student, probably thought he was going to commit the perfect crime and left more evidence in that case than I've seen in quite some cases, and he's exactly where he belongs right now. And you wonder if these allegations are true, and she's a law student, and right, you hear authorities saying she used her law teachings to try to game the system. Sometimes they leave the biggest trail of crumbs more than anyone.
Yeah, absolutely, Jess, because they overthink it, number one, and they don't anticipate. But remember, a lot of this stuff is driven by this thought-based fantasy, right? Okay, these are the things that are going to happen. This is how I'm going to handle it, et cetera. And these offenders go into these crimes anticipating that all of those dots are going to be connected during the commission of the crime. What they don't anticipate is once the victim has been killed, is now they're stuck. They're stuck with this, you know, potential, you know, 150-pound, 200-pound bag of concrete, for lack of a better term. Right. And now they have to figure out, okay, what do I do with the concrete? If they haven't anticipated what to do with that, they really have to go into a disorganized type of, you know, disposal process. And that's why poisoning is so interesting in this particular case. Because like we talked about in the very first one, a knife was very brutal, very personal. However, poisoning gives the offender a distance between the death and having to remove that particular body and overcome that problem.
Yeah, and right now, Ana Paula Fernandes, her twin sister, Roberta Christina, the daughter of one of the victims, Michelle Paiva da Silva, who we talked about before, they're all behind bars right now and under investigation. Why? According to reporting from Metropolis, Roberta Christina allegedly gave her sister advice on how much money her twin should charge to kill someone and how to stay under the radar. Unbelievable. Chris McDonough, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.